Today I'm going to explain what secondary dominant chords are and why they are a vital tool for writing chord progressions. My name is Jack Ruch. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. So to start out, let's explore where dominant seventh chords come from. A dominant seventh chord is the fifth chord in the family of chords derived from the major scale. If we take a look at a C major scale, the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, we can build chords to each one of those notes in the scale and we get this family of chords. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, and B minor 7 flat 5. So the fifth chord in that cycle is our dominant chord, the dominant 5 chord. And that dominant 5 chord is great for building tension that then resolves back to the root. So G7 really wants to resolve back to C major. So now that we understand this harmonic tool of using a dominant 5 chord to build tension, we can use this on the other chords diatonic to C major. These are our secondary dominant chords. So for instance, if we want to go to the 2 chord in C major, the chord D minor, we can use D minor's 5 chord, which is A7. If we want to go to the 3 chord, E minor, we can use E minor's 5 chord, which is B7. If we want to go to F major, we can use F major's 5 chord, which would be C7. If we want to go to the 5 chord, G7, we can use the secondary dominant, or G7's 5 chord, which would be D7. And finally, if we want to go to A minor, the 6th chord, we can use A minor's 5 chord, which would be E7. And I'll leave off that B minor 7 flat 5 chord because that's not really a chord we'd usually resolve to in most chord progressions. Now, if you're wondering how to find these 5 chords on the fretboard, it's really easy. If we're playing a A-shaped bar chord with the root on the A string, like this D minor chord, all you have to do is drop your index finger down 1 string to the E string, and there's the root of the 5 chord. So D minor, drop down to A7. And if you're playing a E bar chord with the root on the E string, like this G7 shape, all you have to do is look at the second note in the chord, the note that your ring finger would be playing, and there's the 5th right there. So D7, the root D, would be the 5th of G. So now let's use these secondary dominant chords to compose a chord progression. First, I'm going to start out by playing a really simple diatonic chord progression in the key of C major. So we'll start by playing C major, and then go to E minor, then to F major, and then up to G major. So a really simple diatonic 4 chord progression. Now we can spice it up and add flavor by adding secondary dominant chords to transition through the chords. So from C major to E minor, we've got to find E minor's 5 chord, the secondary dominant chord that's going to get us there. So E minor's 5 chord is B7. So now instead of just going from C major to E minor, we can go C major to B7 to E minor. Now going from E minor to F, we need to find the 5 chord of F. So the 5 chord of F is C7. So now we have C major, B7, E minor, C7, and then to F. And finally, to get to G, we've got to find G's secondary dominant chord, which the 5 chord of G is D7, right? So now we've got C, B7, E minor, C7, F, D7, and then G. Right, so you can see how these secondary dominant chords add a lot of flavor to a very simple chord progression. And it takes you away from just a simple standard diatonic chord progression. Now you've added some outside chords. But when you understand what's happening harmonically, it makes a lot more sense. So you've probably heard chord progressions like this before, and maybe you didn't quite understand what was going on, but this is a great device that you can use for composing and use to analyze and understand chord progressions that you're learning. Now let's take this one step further and use inversions to create some chromatic bass movement and voice leading between the chords. If we take a look at these first three chords, C major to B7 to E minor or E minor 7, we can play the first inversion of C major right here with the third in the bass with E on the bottom. And that leads perfectly to the first inversion of our B7 chord with the third again on the bass. And then that leads chromatically down to the third inversion of our E minor 7 chord with the flat 7 D in the bass. So now we have this little descending chromatic movement within the chords. So C7. Then when we get to F, right here we can do another chromatic bass movement going from F up to the first inversion of D7 with F sharp in the bass, and that leads us perfectly up to G. So now we've got this. Okay, so another thing I love to use over these secondary dominant chords is the upper structure diminished 7th chord. If we look at an upper structure triad for a dominant chord, the triad built from the 3rd, 5th, and 7th of the chord, it's actually a diminished triad. For instance, if we look at B7 and we start on the 3rd and then play the 5th and the flat 7th, we get this diminished triad. Now if we continue up the cycle of minor thirds, we get this note C, which is the flat 9 of our B7 chord. So now we're getting into some altered dominant territory, but because these are functioning dominant chords, they're 5 chords that are resolving, we can use this to great effect. So now instead of playing just the straight dominant chord for our secondary dominants, we can introduce these diminished 7th voicings, and the great thing about it is they're symmetrical, so we can move them all around the fretboard. For instance, if I play C here, I can go down to B7 and then go up to the 3rd of the B7 chord, which would be D sharp, and play a diminished chord, so something like this. Into E minor, and I can move it around even more. Right, so this is a great way to build on this tension and to create cool chord movements throughout these chords. We can continue it on going to the C7 chord. We can go up again to the 3rd of C7 and play a diminished chord, which leads right into F. And then again for our D7 chord, we can go up to the 3rd of D7 and play another diminished chord, which leads right into G. So that looks like this. Right, so we can get a really cool, colorful, interesting sound that way, something like this. Okay, so the final thing I want to touch on in this lesson is how we can use these secondary dominant chords, these 5-to-1 cadences, as part of a full 2-5-1 cadence. So instead of just playing C major and then a full measure of B7 before we go to E minor, we can actually split up that measure and make it a full 2-5-1 going to E minor. So for that we would play the 2 chord of E minor, which is F sharp minor 7 flat 5, then to B7, and then to E minor. And again, over that B7 chord we can substitute our diminished 7th chord. Right? So then we get some really pretty options like this. Or something like this. And again, everywhere we have a secondary dominant chord, we can use this 2-5-1 technique. So instead of just going from C7 to F major, we can do G minor to C7 to F. G minor is the 2 chord of F major. And going from D7 to G major, we can use G major's 2 chord, which would be A minor to D7 to F. So we can play some really nice variations on this chord progression using this technique. So right, so the cool thing about all these tools that we've talked about today is that all of these things are techniques you can use when you're composing chord progressions, and it really takes a lot of the mystery out of writing chord progressions, because now you can implement these techniques, and instead of just kind of reaching in the dark for random chords, now you have a system of different things you can use when composing a chord progression or when analyzing a song that you've learned. You can see it and hear that, oh, that's a secondary dominant chord, or that's a 2-5-1 moving to that chord. And one of the great things you can do is use these techniques in different ways in different parts of the chord progression. For instance, maybe do a 2-5-1 to one chord, maybe use a diminished substitution over another chord, and maybe use the inversion kind of voice leading technique in another spot of the chord progression. So hopefully you guys got something from this lesson. If you dug the solo that I played at the beginning, I'm going to do a part 2 to this lesson that's going to be available on my Patreon page, where I'll break down how to solo over secondary dominant chords. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time. Take care.